Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our Stormwater Funding Equity Roundtable. I'm Jessica Rackley, again, the Energy and Environment Program Director at the National Governors Association. We're really glad to have you all here again today. Just next slide, please, and then one more down. We want to first off thank our funders for this event, the William Penn Foundation. They focus on protecting the Delaware River watershed. And then I wanted to briefly, before we get into the excellent presentations and then have time for discussion, I wanted to briefly just give a little bit of stage setting. So we really want to focus today. We're going to go more in depth on the topics covered yesterday. And we really want to focus on just state actions. What can states and governor's offices in particular do to address stormwater equity concerns? So with that, we're going to move on to the first panel for today. We have two amazing experts with us here today. We have Howard Newkrug, and he's the executive director and founder of the Water Center at the University of Pennsylvania. Whereas he is also the professor of water practice, teaching courses on water-centric urban resilience and sustainability and global water leadership and innovation. And then we also have Charlotte Katzenmoyer, and she has over 20 years of experience in the water industry and is the CEO for the Capital Region Water, providing wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater services to the city of Harrisburg and portions of the surrounding municipalities. Before her current role, she also served as Director of Public Works with the city of Lancaster. And while in Lancaster, she oversaw the modernization of its water and sewer infrastructure and developed a nationally recognized green stormwater infrastructure program. So it will be a nice flow. Howard will be talking kind of theory and best practices, and then Charlotte will be giving us some actual case study examples. So with that, I will hand things over to Howard.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Jessica. I'm Howard Newkrug from the Water Center at the University of Pennsylvania. And, the Water Center is really about what it says here: science, equity, resilience, and justice. We work with the challenges facing urban water systems, the watersheds that support them, and the communities especially that rely on them. And with that, let's see, I'll go to the next slide. Okay. In summary of my talk is I'm gonna preface this because I heard some things yesterday. I'm not really sure, but I am in the utility world, so my definitions and my words might be a little bit different than yours. I wanted to clear that up front, make sure that we're all on the same page here. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the public message and how I perceive it, at least. And then give you a little history of Philadelphia Water and the stormwater management that happened there, at least from the perspective of rates and tariffs. And then open for discussion. I don't know how much I get to, how ways that states can help, but I'll start off and tell you that everybody needs money. They need grants, they need cash. That's what they need. And they also need some technical assistance and support. So next. So for my preface, I'm going to be focusing on parcel-based stormwater billing. And this to me is critical for the water industry in the US and cities in the US, is that this is the direction that we are headed. And I think this is the primary direction that I hope that states are going to be supporting cities and towns moving towards. This is the only way that you make stormwater, rainwater, a commodity. And you're changing it from being a waste product that you're trying to get into the sewer as quickly as possible and making it something that has some level of value to it. You help keep the runoff out of the sewer and out of the river. You're promoting reuse of the water, recycle, infiltration. And if you can't do any of those things, then you're at least looking at delaying the water getting into the sewer or river. You're managing floods. You're funding to maintain your pipes and your facilities through the parcel-based stormwater billing, and you're keeping rates as affordable as you can. So that's the perspective on the billing piece. And I guess I really just wanted to make sure, because I know this conference is really about funding and equity. And I just want to make sure that everyone recognizes that that's a very different thing than fair and equitable tariffs. All water utilities must do tariffs that are fair and equitable, and that does not include low-income disadvantaged communities at this point. So when we talk about this, when we talk about funding equity, we'll talk about it in a different context of finding ways to support cities and towns and utilities to bring money and expertise to them so that they can have more affordable tariffs. But those tariffs are always going to be based on a fair and equitable system. Stormwater utilities, in my opinion, need to be almost everywhere it rains, and stormwater does not respect political boundaries, as we all know, but it also doesn't respect CSO, MS4, and other boundaries. The stormwater parcel-based billing system for Philadelphia covers our CSO and our MS4 areas. And we're looking to minimize rainwater entering the sewer system or the stream. And that's really the key. And that's irrespective of what kind of stormwater system that you have. The public message: we are adapting urban water policy to balance our Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Act goals with our community needs, such as environmental justice, resilience, and sustainability. It's just really as simple as that, but we all have to recognize that the Clean Water Act was written in the 1970s, and it really doesn't have the same sense. It uses, you can use the words environmental justice, but I think today environmental justice means different things than it did back then. We need to be able to accommodate for that as we do our stormwater management. Another way of saying this is that that we're looking to raise our customers' awareness that the rain is now more than just a nuisance that should be shunted away to the closest river, which is how all of our water systems have been designed. It is now a major environmental, economic, and social justice responsibility for our cities. And to give this some support from the water utility angle is that the shifting role of water utilities from resource provision, providing drinking water, taking your waste away, to a resource stewardship position is something that's happening all over the US and all over the world. This is the International Water Association that said this transition will require a great emphasis on community engagement, industry partnerships, and investment decisions that consider the social, economic, and environmental costs in an ever-changing environment and climate. And this is really important because a lot of the utilities that you'll be working with, particularly the smaller and mid-sized utilities, often are not at this point yet of becoming resource stewards, but are simply working as utilities and providing a specific resource or service. And this change is something that I hope that the states, through technical assistance and through support and through messaging, will help change. So the trade-offs with when you're setting any kind of tariff, but particularly when you do something as complicated as a parcel-based billing tariff, you're looking at the issues of simplicity, so that how do you make things as simple as possible so everyone understands, everyone has the same fee, and everything's based on something that's easy to implement and easy to understand, versus equity, where you're individually for every customer. Again, this is the utilities perspective equity. Every customer is paying for only the stormwater that's on their property, that's leaving their property. So how do we get to where we are now? Well, in the 1960s, and I hope there's nobody from Philly Water here because they'll probably correct me on the date, it might have been the 1950s, we started stormwater utility fees that were set as a function of meter size. And I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this, but this is a pretty common way that water utilities in the 60s and 70s, and some even today, use as the surrogate for how much runoff is coming from your property. The concept was that if you have a 10-inch meter or 12-inch meter, you're pretty big and you probably have a lot of runoff. And as we all know today, that's not necessarily true. But at the time, it was simple. It was the simplest, and it was the best way we can look at fair and equitable as our mechanisms. In the 1980s, our stormwater fees began to rise, and then you can look at the 2010 stormwater monthly fee charges, which were based on meter size. You can see that there's a big discrepancy between someone who had, let's say, a 1-inch meter and a 12-inch meter. That doesn't necessarily mean that the person with the 1-inch meter has much less stormwater going out into their into the stormwater system. As a quick example, a parking lot with no running water had no stormwater fee. And if you have a 1 acre lot with an industrial 1-story building on it with a toilet, it probably has a 5/8-inch meter, even though it is releasing an awful lot of stormwater into our sewer system. So you can start to see and understand the discrepancies here. And it was really the large water users that pay most of the stormwater fees, and that is irrespective, again, of property size and type. And it was considered not fair and equitable. Our large water users recognized this in the 1980s. And in the 1990s, in 1996, we had a citizen advisory council looking at the stormwater fee reallocation. How do you reconsider stormwater? You can see on the left is a picture of a car dealership, and the amount of, and you can see the amount of land. I think they had a 2-inch water line going into the property, so they're paying $140, $150 a month. You can imagine the amount of stormwater that's coming off there. So the idea of the CAC was to create a fair and equitable distribution of stormwater costs across all classes, parcel-based stormwater fee system for non-residential classes. We kind of started thinking about, well, how do you do 500,000 residential properties and do that fairly and equitably? Well, we went more to the simple perspective and say that for simplicity's sake, we're not going to have 500,000 different stormwater rates for properties. We're going to have one. But for the non-residential, which is basically commercial, industrial classes, we will have this other fee system. For the stormwater geeks in the audience, for Philadelphia, the equivalent dwelling unit was set at 2,090 square feet of gross area and 1,060 square feet of impervious area. We were able to implement the residential shift. We were able to take half of the stormwater utility costs and put that on a flat rate system for residential properties in 2002, but we didn't have enough understanding of the parcel data to implement the non-residential until 2010. This is the kind of data that we needed, and luckily we found a really smart young engineer at University of Pennsylvania who came in and understood how to take all these databases and put them together and make a database that was suitable for moving forward. And obviously the water sewer billing database, but that had nothing to do with the tax database because sometimes they had different addresses, they had different names, they fronted different sides. Property deeds were used, GIS and orthographics were just coming into fashion at that time. And we even needed to do on-site inspections. At the same time, the Office of Watersheds was formed at Philly Water, and our idea was to take the CSO program, the long-term control plan, and make it an integrated watershed management plan. This was a very difficult thing that actually we didn't get our permission to move forward with this until 2011, 2012. But you can see our idea was to take all these things and put them together, and as a goal, certainly, as Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act says, fishable, swimmable, drinkable. But also, because we're looking at an integrated plan, we also wanted to be safe, attractive, accessible, and resilient. And finally, and taking the issues of the day, how do you also make this affordable, equitable, sustainable, just, and inclusive? So how do you take all these things and make this all happen at the same time? And as I said, probably about my first slide is that everything needs to be balanced. We need to be able to balance priorities in Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act with other needs. This is the way that we do it. I had some fun making this slide yesterday. basically in Philadelphia, our stormwater program is called Green City Clean Waters. Our goal is to get 10,000 acres out of the storm system over the 25 years. But it's also, cities are all different. Some are dealing with flooding or resilience issues, climate equity, justice. All of this sits on top of what has to be in place in order to accomplish these things, really, is a parcel-based stormwater billing system. And supporting all this is retrofits on public land and private land, and also redevelopment regulations, which become key. Yeah. So 2006 now, stormwater redevelopment regulations happened before our fee system for non-residential properties. And this has been really successful. This is a major leg in our stool of stormwater management. We manage first inch. Every building that gets built in Philadelphia, and it's all built on properties that have been built before they manage first inch of rainfall. They provide channel protection and flood control. In 2006, the first year of this program, we got 1 square mile of the city redeveloped. And because they had to manage the first inch on that, we got 18 million gallons of runoff kept out of the sewer for every 1 inch storm we had. And in the city, surprisingly, and this is a pretty common number, is 0.4% annual redevelopment. So I can't tell you how important this is, that if you do nothing else but have a redevelopment regulations that are relatively stringent, that you can evolve your city over time with no costs to get the stormwater management taken care of if you have 100 years. In 2012, we updated the regulation to manage the first inch and a half, and we expedited the review for green infrastructure. In 2010, non-residential parcel-based stormwater billing came into effect. We phased it in over 4 years. That probably was not long enough. I'd recommend 10 years to phase something like this in. We shift costs to high impact properties. Everything was kept revenue neutral. We weren't looking for new money. We were just looking to make the money equitable and fair. And we based it on true cost of service calculations. And this is the magic of this, is employing a credit system to encourage retrofits of existing property to green infrastructure. For time's sake, this is just the general rule of impacted customers. We have big meters, we have big land mass. They probably didn't see much of a change. If a small meter and a big land mass, you saw a big increase, and otherwise a small increase. And this is a graph of this showing a monthly billing. As we expected, most of the accounts, most of the 23,000 commercial industrial accounts saw no change in their billing, or virtually no change. But we saw quite a number who were going to get significant reduction in their bills. And we also saw quite a number who were going to get an increase in their bills. We looked at this as utility folks and said, this looks fair. This looks fair and equitable. This should work. What we found out is that not everyone agrees, and that particularly the people who are going to be paying more, and some paying significantly more, formed a group called the Unified Business Owners of Philadelphia, and they handed out these packages of these cooling eye masks or face masks, in case you have a stormwater headache, and try this. And these were people who never knew what stormwater was. They didn't know how to talk about stormwater, but they learned quickly and they went to city council. What we found out is that somehow, I guess someone who spoke to in city council, we used the term winners and losers. And that kind of took hold, and that kind of created quite a bit of political concern, because what we found out is that the winners, they walk away. The losers stay there. The losers become the constituents of the politicians, and the politicians start to help fight for the rights of reducing these fees. So 2 examples. A winner is this large apartment building. The old charge, they were paying $4,700 a month, and the new charge is $120 a month, versus a loser, which was paying $377 a month, and they now pay $2,450. These are all 2017 numbers, I believe. Okay. Today, the 2017, these, for those who want to know what the charges are, you'll get copies of this, so I won't sit on this too long, but the residential, the flat fee is $14.79 per month in Philadelphia. How do we do with equity? Well, we deal with equity by having in place in 2016 the first low-income tariff system for Philadelphia, for anywhere in the country, really. And if you're at 50% of the federal poverty level, this little graph in the top right here, you can, if you get through this system, you pay $12 a month instead of the $70, $80 a month, which a typical household bill is, and that goes up to about 150% of the federal poverty level. So just looking at technical financial policy considerations, identifying customer classes, these are the 5 steps that you need to do in order to figure out how you can have a parcel-based billing system. Yeah, you got to understand what your customer classes are. You need to allocate the costs among them. You need to develop a fee structure and a credit program. Got to do that data management and the operations. You need to be able to operate the system, which means basically billing and enforcement and continued data management. So you can see that this is not a simple system here. It's very complicated, but it is the way that you make rainwater a commodity. Yeah. And just to show that in the future, things are looking a little different. Cost is still going to be high, but we're looking at systems of predictive analysis, artificial intelligence, predicting when it's going to rain and where it's going to rain, how it's going to land on the ground, with the runoff modeling, and also looking at the sewers and the hydraulics within the sewers, and looking at the rivers and streams and looking at the impact on them, and being able to adjust your system real time in order to meet those needs. So this is kind of where the industry's headed. We're certainly not there in a lot of systems in your states, but this is where we're headed. I also want to just point this out. This is the classic model, which can really help. It's a brand new system. It was released this week, and you can go online and you can do all different kinds of scenarios for stormwater infrastructure and look at different issues. This would be an incredible thing for states and EPA and others to help explain and work with communities in order to make change. So I'm looking forward to a discussion with other ways states can help. And here's a list of some of the things they can do, but we're so glad to have you there, and glad to continue to work with you. So thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Charlotte Katzenmoyer. I am the Director of Public, previously the Director of Public Works for the City of Lancaster. Now I am the CEO for Capital Region Water. And I'm going to talk about 2 different, try and get control here. I'm going to talk about 2 different case studies, one from Lancaster and one from Harrisburg. So I will talk about those coming up. And Tim, I don't think I have control. I don't have the arrows. Okay, now I see them. Okay, thank you. All right, so for Harrisburg, we are using PennVest funding to fund our the initial phase of our GSI program, our Green Stormwater Infrastructure Program, to target 50 acres in 3 priority planning areas. And those priority planning areas are based on some hydraulic modeling that we did to show where we could achieve the highest level of control or the most capture of combined sewer overflows. So that $13 million that we received from PennVest will fund 5 years of the program for those 3 priority planning areas. So we were able to identify, based on some planning in those priority areas, we were able to identify 21 projects that are basically the first phase of those 50 acres that we want to manage over those 5 years. And those will be the early action projects. These just show some of the ones that are already either in planning down in the left-hand corner, or a park that's currently under construction that's being funded with the Penvest funds, and another project in South Allison Hill, which is Green Streets. So there's various types of projects that we are implementing throughout those 3 priority planning areas. So in Lancaster, we also had $13 million for about 124 projects. Half of that $13 million were used for the public projects that we constructed for green stormwater infrastructure, again, for a combined sewer community. And half of the Penvest funds we used to incentivize private property owners by giving them grants, 90% grants towards green infrastructure that they were implementing as part of their redevelopment projects. So we were able to incentivize them with the use of some of the Penvest funds. We also had some Growing Greener Plus funds from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection that we used for some of the concept designs for the projects. I'll also mention that EPA did a triple bottom line benefit study of Lancaster's green stormwater infrastructure program, and we could provide the link later on if you're interested in that. But it does show the benefits are not just for stormwater control, but they also provide climate benefits, and the report goes into detail in how those were calculated. It calculates the annual reduction in wastewater pumping and treatment costs, and the avoided green infrastructure cost of providing tanks or tunnels in lieu of green stormwater infrastructure, and also shows how much for the investment that was projected for the 20-year planning horizon in Lancaster in their long-term control plan. So that's a good resource. So some of the funding sources that I've used for many of the projects, both in Lancaster and Harrisburg. Again, Penvest funding, we've used liquid fuels funds for some of the green streets projects. We've used PennDOT funding through the Automated Red Light Enforcement Grant Program, Smart Growth Transportation funds from our local MPO. As I mentioned, Growing Greener funds. Pennsylvania DCNR also had Dirt and Gravel Road Maintenance Program funds that they provided a portion of that to urban cities, in addition to the dirt and gravel roads that they provided to townships for implementing green stormwater infrastructure projects. We've used NIFWIF funds, Chesapeake Bay Trust, Green Street, Green Jobs, Green Towns funds, and we've actually done some crowdfunding for some of the stormwater art projects that we incorporated into some of the projects, and I'll mention one of them shortly. So this is one of the projects that won a BUBBA award in Lancaster. If you've never heard of BUBBA, the Chesapeake Bay Stormwater Network has a contest every year. The best, and one of them is the Best Urban BMP in the Bay Award. So that's how the acronym they came up with BUBBA. But this was the first BUBBA award in the country for the Chesapeake Bay Stormwater Network. You can see in this intersection, it's a gateway into the downtown of Lancaster, into the commercial area. And just to the north of this intersection, the red brick building that you see there is the Lancaster Brewing Company. Traffic Commission in Lancaster received a lot of complaints from the residents in the row homes to the left of the brewing company because of all the accidents of this unwieldy merge lane that comes off of North Plum Street onto Walnut Street, and how the cars didn't tend to merge properly and caused accidents. So this was one of the early projects that we identified to have a makeover with green stormwater infrastructure. So we incorporated various types of BMPs. I'll talk a little bit about each one of those. But as one of the benefits, we saw a 5 mile per hour reduction in traffic speed through this intersection. The traffic accidents basically disappeared with these improvements that we made. The brewing company dubbed the project as we were doing outreach in the neighborhood as the beer garden, rightly so, but we also achieved 1.7 million gallons per year of reduction in runoff at a cost of $20 cents per gallon, which is much more cost effective than a stormwater tank or a tunnel. So you can see the patio that we were able to re-envision the pavement being retrofitted with an outdoor patio space for the brewing company. So we got some economic development out of it. You can see the pavers were porous with a rain garden right next to it, a raised planter. The brewing company actually used that space for some urban gardening for their restaurant. We also, you can see the patio in use there. And we designed, this is one of the projects that we did crowdfunding for. We had an artist design a cistern that accepted rainwater from the rooftop of the brewing company, but also was an interactive stormwater feature for the site. We also developed a placemat for the brewing company to use to help educate their customers and hopefully city residents on the importance of stormwater, but it had some nice puzzles and games for their children to play while they were eating in the brewing company. So in both cases, in Lancaster and Harrisburg, the process for developing a stormwater fee, just a little bit more detailed and adding on to what Howard mentioned before. You know, some of the drivers that we looked at was the aging infrastructure in addition to the regulatory compliance that Howard mentioned, and also localized flooding. This was one intersection that I mentioned at the brewing company, which had localized flooding. It was a low-lying intersection. We were able to eliminate the flooding that happened in that intersection. But also an important piece of one of the drivers is financial modeling. And I'll talk about some of the equity considerations a little bit later on. But defining the stormwater program is important. Branding it is also important. I'll talk about the branding in a little bit. One of the things that we recognized was very important was pilot projects. If you're going to start talking about stormwater and a fee, do some pilot projects in each neighborhood. We did pilot projects all throughout the city in Lancaster, and we're doing that in Harrisburg now. And those demonstration projects, the residents and businesses will be much more accepting of a new fee if they can actually see what their money is going to pay for. The planning is very important. If a stormwater fee is to actually act like a fee for service rather than a tax, a rain tax that many like to call it, that you have to have the report and the backup to justify how much the fee should be in each scenario, in each city. Public engagement is also very important. As Howard talked about, an advisory task force was used in each case in the case studies that I'm talking about. So I talked about branding. I think it's very important that your residents and businesses understand what the stormwater fee is. And one way of doing that is by branding. In Lancaster, we dubbed it Save It, Your Money, Your Water, Your City. and had a separate website specifically for that program. In Harrisburg, it's the City Beautiful H2O program plan, which is the long-term control plan for the city. But this logo is used anywhere we have a project related to the City Beautiful H2O program. So a little bit about financial capability. This data is very similar for both Lancaster and Harrisburg. I'm referring to the Harrisburg financial capability analysis that we did. Almost 32 or over 32% of the households in Harrisburg have a utility bill that exceeds 3.4% of their income. If you know anything about EPA's financial capability, they refer to a 2% threshold as being a high burden for the wastewater portion of the utility bill. So as you can see, we have a very high affordability issue in Harrisburg. Just looking at our long-term control plan and evaluating the different control alternatives that we looked at, and superimposing the high level of burden in 2017 when the program plan was created. You can see the different types of alternatives that were evaluated, and Harrisburg can spend about $300 million on their long-term control plan. But again, it's a high level of burden for many of the residents. So, you know, that's the threshold that we expect to spend over the next 20 to 25 years in Harrisburg on this program. Just one note that, you know, that defining affordability by US EPA standards does not really show you the reality of each individual household burden. So this just shows that, you know, that basically the two types of alternatives, a centralized end of pipe strategy versus a local decentralized green and gray approach, had about the same cost. But the decentralized green and gray approach in Harrisburg has so many other social, economic, and environmental benefits that we decided to go with the decentralized green and gray approach. So why a stormwater fee? Again, you'll be getting these slides, so I won't go through each of these, but two to note is that the stormwater fee, as Howard said, is based on the impervious area, which better correlates to the amount of stormwater runoff from each property. So it's a more equitable approach. You can also incentivize property owners to manage stormwater on their own property with a stormwater fee. Other basis of billing does not provide that incentive. There are over 1,800 stormwater programs nationwide. And somebody noted, I think I saw that somebody from Western Kentucky University might be on the call. So somebody noted on another program that I displayed this, that we should not use the green and blue, the blue and red colors on this, because it kind of relates to political boundaries rather than the stormwater that we're trying to show. But you can see how stormwater utilities are spread out across the country. So looking at why a stormwater fee is more equitable in Harrisburg, you can see that if we were to do as we were billing stormwater previous to 2014, the fee for residential customers comprised about 48% of our budget. So they contributed about 48%, 2.5.4 million of the program. Whereas when we went to an impervious area based fee, the residential component goes down significantly to only 23% of the budget, since they have a smaller portion of the impervious area. So the non-residential properties make up 77%, or about $4 million of the budget, because they generate the most stormwater. So with a stormwater fee, the residential customers pay about $1.3 million less. So that's why it is more equitable, particularly in communities, older urban centers where affordability is an issue. In Lancaster, we looked at it in a little bit different way. We compared an average residential customer in 3 different billing scenarios. The sewer charge, if we were to continue charging the stormwater program based on the sewer charge, which is based on the water consumption, a typical residential customer would be paying about $20. If we were to do it based on a flat tax, they'd be paying $24. But with an impervious area-based fee, they would be paying $10. So much more affordable for a residential customer. We also looked at it for a commercial customer. Again, based on the old way of doing it, a commercial customer was paying about $51 based on their water usage. By switching to an impervious area-based fee, their fee on a quarterly basis was would be $139. So again, they're paying their fair share of the stormwater program because they generate more stormwater. Elements of a successful program, Howard touched on a lot of these. The assessment is very important. The stormwater fee should just not show up on the first utility bill. There should be an assessment notice that basically explains to the property owner the purpose of the new fee that will appear on their utility bill. The credit system is important because most lawyers will tell you that if it's to act like a true fee, there needs to be some mechanism for the property owner to control the amount of their fee by controlling stormwater on their property. And there needs to be an appeal process. So these are some of the stakeholders that we engaged as part of our outreach, and also many of them served on the task force that we had used throughout the process of developing both the long-term control plan and the stormwater fee implementation. One thing that I will mention that has been a dilemma for us in Pennsylvania for most authorities, as well as cities, is Commonwealth agencies. I would recommend that any language that any governor or legislators propose, that there be specific language requiring state agencies to pay their stormwater fee. We're facing this right now in the Commonwealth. It's hard to explain to residential and commercial customers why they need to pay the fee if all governmental entities are not paying their fair share of the stormwater fee. They generate quite a bit of stormwater, particularly in Harrisburg, with the capital being in Harrisburg. So a lot of their stormwater is going right into our system, which then overflows to the Susquehanna River if it's uncontrolled as part of our stormwater program, our CSO program. So you need to walk the walk. If you're going to require local municipalities and jurisdictions and authorities to implement these types of environmental programs, then everyone needs to contribute to the cost of that program. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one. And I think that's the last slide I have. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
It's okay.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here to share with you the history of the Chester Stormwater Authority and how it was started. As you said, in 2016, I was asked by the city of Chester to establish the Stormwater Authority to deal with the enormous amount of problems that they were having with their storm system infrastructure and inlets and flooding and other problems that was going on as a result of an overwhelming amount of responsibility that was placed on the city that had little revenue to be able to meet the challenge. And they felt the only solution was to establish a Stormwater Authority to meet the needs of approximately over 2,000 inlets and MS4 program that was unable to be dealt with in a reasonable amount of time, leaving a lot of residents with issues as having basements flooded, streets flooded, unpassable. 291, the main highway, was flooding consistently, and the city realized that they needed to focus specifically on stormwater programs because at that particular time, the highway department was tasked with the responsibility of the highway department and also stormwater management. It was really interesting that I was asked to do that as an environmentalist. I was at that time working with the Chester Water Authority, and they, as you noted in your presentation, was instrumental in helping us get this thing up and running. But I was also working as an environmental advocate in the state of Pennsylvania, dealing with a community in Amarillo, PA. And in that community, we had some tremendous problems with asbestos and the Superfund site and close proximity to residential houses. And the residents had not gotten the consideration that they needed from, I thought, from the EPA or from the colleges and universities that was operating and getting grants in that community to deal with and to investigate asbestos. So they had assigned a young lady by the name of Dominique Lukenhall to come in and troubleshoot and handle that problem. And I just have to know Dominique from the work that she did with us in 1990s with the environmental issues in the city of Chester. And I told Dominique what I've been asked to do, and she said, really? I want to help you. And so from that point on, we began to work together, and she began to assist us with the technical assistance that we needed and give me a little room to breathe, because I was like, you know, in a position where I was asked to fly a spaceship to the moon without knowing, you know, how to fly the ship. But I'm just thankful that the city has taken this responsibility and realized how important it is for us to meet the needs of this community. And in the process of doing this, we were also blessed by PennVest, the Pennsylvania State program, that saw the need for a stormwater authority to be established in the city of Chester. They provided a $1 million grant to us to do a planning program to put this thing in place. In the process, we had to reach out to the community because, as you know, the fee assessments was something that had never been done in the city of Chester. And a low-income minority community was not readily to receive extra expenditures coming from any state or government agency. So we did a massive PR program when every community and the city was transparent and educated the community concerning their need to be responsible for what takes place outside their doors. Most residents felt, well, if it's not in my house, it's not my electric, not my water, not my gas, why should I worry about storm water? And so as we began to even explain the very simple terms like pervious and impervious, and the trash goes into our creeks and to our waterways, and that we're in close proximity to the Delaware River, and that we have to take responsibility for this community that we live in because there's nobody else to do it but us. They began to understand the need for a stormwater management program and begin to support it. And today we are functioning every day, 5 days a week. I said every day, but 5 days a week, managing stormwater and bringing in street cleaning and backcombs, cleaning the inlets and reducing the flooding and reducing the debris that's going to our waterways and serving our community on a daily basis. It took a lot of help to do this. A community of our size, financial distress, could not do that without the support of the EPA and the state of Pennsylvania taking the interest, and that's where we are today. Dominique is here because she has been our cheerleader, the trumpeter, And our names together, we have among ourselves is that she's Hurricane and I'm Storm. We made a lot of noise and did a lot of good things to make things happen in Chester. So I'm going to turn it over to Dominique, and she can give you a more technical view of how this thing got started.
Thank you, Dr. Strand. Let's see. Sorry about that. Just want to go back. First of all, want to thank Chester for going forward in this regard. And the assistance he's talking about actually was probably about 3 or 4 years in the development. And I just wanted to give a bit of background because this actually is a program and platform that had not existed before to give the ability to aggregate large-scale integrated green infrastructure. I say integrated because you're not going to get rid of the gray. And having worked in this arena with EPA for many years, in fact, even the start of defining green infrastructure, creating the cost-benefit analysis, and I want to thank Howard Newkrug and Charlotte, who referenced some of the work EPA did. They're going forward as champions to demonstrate how this can be done. Embedding all of those details was very important in terms of lessons learned and how to reevaluate the ability to provide this help to communities. Just a little bit of background, and I said I would sing the praises of Brian Johnson if I did nothing else today. Brian, thank you so much. Having a partner in Pinvest with these kinds of firsts, very important to go back and do lessons learned and figure out how we get it better. A community-based public-private partnership, what we found that government procurement systems were never designed, never. They go back to, for those of you who are, when I started with Dr. Strand, he said 1990, I was 10 years old. I just want to make sure you understand that for the record. The old construction grant program, that's what kind of evolved, right, into SRF. And really the remnants are still there in terms of the program and the application. Now, when it comes to stormwater, which is already inherently decentralized, right, not that central treatment facility, and distributed, and people can't see it, we really have fits and starts. I mean, while there have been stormwater utilities around the country, not all of them, by the way, use those dedicated revenue fees towards stormwater. It would be good to go back and reevaluate, how successful they've been, and if they haven't, why. That's just one recommendation. But really, we wanted to revisit the ability to deliver integrated large-scale green infrastructure. You think of all those BMPs, they all still need to go through the procurement process. Very inefficient. I did global expert panels looking at barriers to implementation and barriers to innovation. It was actually driven by the high cost to urban communities due to the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. I had communities coming to me saying, I can't do it. So we looked for ways to help them. And this, what we found, one of the findings was you as government don't engage private sector on various levels, not just financing actually, but the lessons learned and how to do this. And we of course found that if someone did want to invest in large scale stormwater green infrastructure, it was very difficult to do so, especially given that the predominant universe is over 6,000 or so, phase 2, small municipal MS4s. So true of Pennsylvania, so true in this whole Delaware Basin watershed as we saw 900. So how do we aggregate it? But how do we also deliver the true benefit of green infrastructure, which really means local economic development, jobs, reduced urban heat island, improved recreational opportunities, greater public health, small business, all those kinds of things. And how do we revisit that in the context of contracts? Because this can be procurement, it could be P3 legislation, but getting more efficiencies and driving the cost down. So think economy of scale, market-driven approaches, get competition because it was costing way too much to retrofit 1 urban acre. And there were technologies and designs out there, particularly with green infrastructure, that really should have been lower cost. And instead of this piecemeal one-off approach that we kind of had, we wanted to make it a holistic, think environmental management system in terms of what P3s, and that's why I named it P3, but called it community-based, because this was driven by community needs, community values. If they value it and if they see the benefits, they will invest in it. And that's the idea of self-reliance for EJ communities, because it's a business model. It's a special purpose entity that comes in, sets up the right kind of technical expertise, legal, financial, engineering, technical, public outreach, you name it, to be able to do this. So what we did with Chester, when Dr. Strand and I met, I think I was, 20 at that time, Dr. Strand, he said, can EPA help us to put our stormwater utility together? We established the authority under the Municipal Authorities Act, which was a plus that Pennsylvania has this authority. However, no money to do it. They were in Chapter 47, Chester, $60 million in debt. Every revenue source that had been there pretty much had left, had disinvested. There were, deferred maintenance where there was buildup everywhere. So it's not as clean as let's just go create a stormwater program. You got to start with the fact that there was already cumulative, disparate, adverse impacts in these communities. And it's really important when we say these things to go in and understand what life is day to day for a community like that. What life is when you bring money in that they've never had before. They can't apply for it. I actually applied for it. My team, I said, hey, you can't do that because we send SRF money to the state. I said, this is EJ, and there's nothing like having the perspective of how hard it is to work on the other side. And I wanted to really see what is life like from the other side. And it was very difficult, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But these are just some summary points about the model and the approach that was successful in Chester, but also note that it's happening in different parts of the country. It is about sustainability. It always integrated the idea of equitable wealth building and socioeconomic fairness. And I really appreciate the comments yesterday. How do we think smarter and integrate infrastructure, integrate financing, create more transparency and bring more value to that community, but think towards business and self-reliance, creating circular economies and jobs towards the future. More important than ever in this day of climate and resilience. And very important as relates to EJ communities. And it was so wonderful to work with the local leadership of Dr. Strand, who I'd worked with on EJ when I developed the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Strategy and Plan. So I had a lot of that knowledge and background that I was able to bring to this. But what was important is if you do not have the local leadership, the mayor, Dr. Strand, his council, his board, were all around this. You could deliver the best design system, it will not go. Let's see, I'm gonna advance. So just quickly, here's the model. And the idea was, design, build, finance, operate, maintain. We're in trouble today getting D's in infrastructure because we really haven't invested in O&M because there's only money for capital. So how do we create models that give us efficiencies, say 30 to 40%, that can be reinvested in that and invested in that O&M? For stormwater, as we know, and particularly green infrastructure, that O&M is compliance, that O&M is local jobs, that O&M is creating clean, green, walkable streets and reduced urban heat island. It brings the true benefits. But what is very important is that those key performance targets are set. The municipality maintains control. Think of this as a special purpose entity that is brought in. And in fact, we have developed template models for RFIs, RFQs, and RFPs. For Chester, because what we were trying to do was actually build the stormwater utility through this model, because if you think about, what you'll see, all the aspects that we had identified and addressed very aligned with, what a stormwater utility is set up to do. So we actually built a stormwater utility in, I'll tell you, a sixth of the time. It was often running in a year, believe it or not. Through this approach, we integrated the development of the utility into the RFP, into the RFQ. We did an RFQ/P. So just that, this is applied to MS4s, but we're finding it's very adaptable. SRF funding of choice, certainly the best deal for the money. However, we find many of our MS4s really can't apply for it. Chester would not have been able to apply for this. We were able to create partnerships to start to launch it. And thanks to Pinvest seeing this business model and working with EPA to ensure that we could quickly get those revenues going and in place, along with having Chester Water Authority actually was also an underwriter. So wherever we can get those partnerships with wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater, lots of opportunity there, but also think green streets. That's another.
Dominique, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. So you said Chester could not apply for the SRF, and why was that? Was it the credit rating because they were, or was it capacity?
They were bankrupt. They were
okay.
bankrupt.
All right, so that's important. Yeah. So,
but
right,
but then let's go to the next sliding scale. Many municipalities have low credit ratings, for other requirements, there were other requirements they couldn't meet. They also, applying for it. It's still, and I brought this to EPA headquarters attention. The application platform, because this is not the states, this came from EPA. It's still heavily weighted to wastewater. I mean, the components of it are still wastewater. When I brought this to the attention of headquarters, they said, yeah, these are remnants, because of the old construction. And I suggested that EPA create a new platform, actually specifically targeted to integrated green infrastructure as an application and provide that to the states, because this would have sent anyone the opposite direction. I will tell you that. And I was working with a very talented, talented engineering support and that kind of thing from my end. So when I mentioned, I put in the chat yesterday that they need help. This is the start of it. So I'm gonna just kind of, sorry about that, run through these. Thought I had it together. All right. So just to give you an idea, this program is very place-based. It will change by the community, by the state, because of what they care about. But I can tell you, our center is now working with over 100 communities across the country, from the Southeast, Puerto Rico, North Atlantic, mid to California and Hawaii. And there are commonalities in terms of why they want this. Certainly compliance, but importantly, local flooding, concerns for drought and climate. And very importantly, when we launched this program, in the first pilot, as Charlotte indicated, pilots are us. Let's do some more in the Delaware. We did it as not only stormwater, this is Prince George's County, but also as economic redevelopment. So for Chester, in terms of their permit, they really did not need a $50 million program just to meet paid-up MS4 permit requirements. But if you visit these permits, let me just say that they don't require, they're still last generation. Because when you think about stormwater and what it is contributing in terms of adverse runoff, carries with it everything, right, in terms of land development. So Dr. Strand mentioned toxics. Chester was also in a CSO community, Delcora. All of Delcora's CSOs, this is for the Delaware County, dump into poor little Chester. EPA took a large enforcement action, a $100 million consent decree. And the thought was, you know, how do we start to look at synergies? For example, if Chester's setting up a program with local jobs, I think Dr. Strand mentioned up to 60 local jobs now to address stormwater, there are opportunities to now partner with Delcora and be able to do some of the work for Delcora, as an example. So here are our outcomes, outcome-based. You know, this $50 million program was based on an early assessment we at EPA did. We took a look at GIS data, et cetera, indicated that really to get the local flooding and along with it, the pathogens, now we've got COVID, right, in sewage, heavy trash, debris, toxics, heavy metals, think of all those brownfields, and lead that are running off. Let's not go with the base. Let's look at the fact that these are already overburdened. If we're going to be successful, let's figure out how we're going to address all of it. So we went for 20% of imperviousness, which was over 300 acres, and we factored a target of roughly 50,000 an acre, and we've got a CBP3 calculator that we can input, you know, SRF financing terms, but we can also do private bonds, et cetera, and show with different terms, 15, 20, 30 years. This is a 30-year, what the annualized costs are, and then what kind of revenues would you need to raise? So I'm just sort of jumping to the end here that today, Chester, the Stormwater Authority has already saved the city $149 million, and I'll just mention some of that is because the city provided the storm sewer to Chester. The Water Authority, Stormwater Authority purchased it, and with it addressed the flood insurance and things like that, and started working with local contractors. So you see over $1 million starting, 24 million in O&M, and the community, importantly, is seeing the results of that and more bought into it. So this is the vision, and I'll just run through economic impact as well as improving environment. You heard this was the solicitation process. The award was made for the CVP3, the special purpose entity was awarded in 2017. You see the you know, what they're addressing. And then of course, I mentioned that we're seeing a 30 to 40% cost reduction. It's not just the money, it's what is the money producing. And a CVP3 says to that private entity, you don't get paid until you do the work and we have the performance, which is really disrupting what the status quo in terms of how government gets things done. So you're incentivized by getting the work done, but getting it done qualitatively, not just like this low bid. These were the partnership goals, for example, and they're already setting up the ability now to move through all the public outreach and engagement to create the stormwater utility. Here's an example of the numerous meetings Dr. Strand had. Dr. Strand being a leader, an anchor of resilience in the community, was able to quickly galvanize this. What was different, I'll tell you in here, and I'll sort of roll through these slides. You'll see some of them. This is the site screening process that was used. It was mentioned aerial photography and LiDAR. The special purpose partner was able to come in and start to do this work and identify where you get the best bang for the buck. You know, the larger the projects, and if they could get going with some early money from Pinvest, then the community sees a result. Park projects, because they can also use that recreationally. So this was an infrastructure plan that incorporated that triple bottom line. These were ranked. These community was engaged, in fact, community and other stakeholders to do the rankings. Flooding mitigation, you see that's at the very top, water quality and of course revitalization of the central business district and public spaces and recreational and educational opportunities, including retrofitting school parcels. So these were the top sites that came out. The top 10 sites were selected. ERU method was used. It was mentioned yesterday that that was considered one of the more equitable approaches, impervious cover, and the primary classes of customers, of course, being the commercial, industrial, residential, and tax exempt. There were over 12,000 parcels that were identified, and these are some of the numbers. 84% of the city is developed. Found that nearly 50% of the parcels owned, so these are primarily commercial, industrial, were owned by entities not only outside of Chester, but a number of them outside the state of Pennsylvania. And they had some of the largest areas of imperviousness contributing to that high volume, flashy runoff, and ultimately the impact that Chester experienced, but we're not paying to address that. So again, I thank the Phillies of the world, Howard, for going forward with that type of model so that we could take advantage of that. And I will mention that Howard, as an expert, was able to help the city of later when these commercial and industrial properties, many of them very, very large, there's even a racetrack, weren't paying taxes to Chester because it's an opportunity zone. So Chester wasn't getting very much of the benefit. There was a promise of jobs and a promise of economic redevelopment, but it really had not happened. So here's the breakout, primarily 32% commercial. Most of the fees were covered by commercial, industrial, only 70%, 17% residential. The average, the ERU was a little over 1,000 square feet. That was came to $825 per ERU. And for commercial, an average was 10 billing units in terms of size. And so approximately 50%, well, I mentioned that, the revenues are now over 2.1 million, and Chester has been able to pursue and successfully work with Pinvest in getting the additional financial assistance, including grants. So remember, the grants are important. This is a business model. This is not, let's not patronize these communities. Let's empower them. So it is important to think like a business model of how they are set up to do their own business. However, getting there and realizing that nothing has been done, there's deferred maintenance, there's other kinds of problems. The grants provided by Pinvest were very important to get this, not only the model launched by being able to implement projects and show the community the benefit. So I just left this slide. We created a community-based public-private partnership center for water, energy, and equitable economic resilience. Dr. Seth Brown heads the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, and I'm chair of the center, but Seth has been on the Hill. This model has reached the White House. It was in the Obama White House. Moody's and Fitch has picked up on it as the alternative approach for getting stormwater accomplished. There's a lot of interest in it. Obviously, for those of us that really want to see it transfer and bring more value, we want to help get more of these done. So I just wanted to leave that website address, and also EPA has a CBP3 website. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Strand and Dominique.